Hi there, it's Alice Bias, and you're listening to the Successful Mentalist podcast.
Hello and welcome to another really exciting episode of the Successful Mentalist podcast. Now, if you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, really, you'll know that myself in particular is obsessed with psychology, and not just on a high level, just I'm interested in it, but actually the behind the scenes of psychology and how that applies directly into magic. And today we're going to have a conversation that really leverages all of that in such an amazing way. Now, our guest today has done some pretty incredible things, from TED Talks to research studies all around the subject of psychology, behind forcing the psychology of magic. And I don't want to do all of the crazy hype because you've got so many strings to your bow. Alice, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here as well.
Like, Alice, you've done so many different things. I really want to get straight in and just, like, could you give us an overview of some of the things that you've actually, just about you and what you've done? And we'll unpack from there.
So basically, I started to study psychology 9 years ago, and I was already a bit into magic, but like I lack of self-discipline to have a proper level, but I had the interest already. And then when I had to do some small research projects for my undergrads, I wanted to make my research fun for me and my participants, because most of the time psychological research is like having a participant in front of a laptop pushing buttons, and it's like very boring for everyone. So I wanted to do something fun, and I wanted to combine it with magic tricks. So I got into the magic literature. And I was, so in psychology, I was into all the techniques which can influence our behaviors. And that's where I saw the link with forcing techniques. So I started to do small research projects on forcing techniques and to explain how we are influenced in our day-to-day lives and stuff like this. And then it just grew and grew. And then I ended up doing an entire Ph.D. thesis on that. And so I spent the last 3 years doing a lot of experiments using all kind of forces to test the success rates and the psychological mechanisms that underpin the techniques, basically.
So exciting. I mean, this is just amazing. Would you be able to give a little insight into what was your favorite part of those studies?
I think there's one I really like because it's a risky one. I used, like, when I started to get into like the magic literature, I was very naive, I think, and I was very into all the Darren Brown stuff. And I started to find his techniques on like how he can influence people to think of specific cards with like just specific gestures and like conversational gestures and keywords. And I was like, this is so cool. I want to test this. And I was so sure, because it was Darren Brown, that it was going to work so well. So I tried this. It worked, but not that much. But still, it's really fun. So I've done, I think, 10 experiments on one of Darren Brown's technique in which he primes the spectators to think of the Three of Diamonds. And it's just like, I love doing this because still, if it doesn't work like 100% of the time, it's still very fun for me to, like, for me, it's the real magic of psychology as well, because you actually influence a thought process, which is very hard to influence. And in psychology, the effects that we have, even though it's like very small for a magician, it's like huge for science. It's like, we didn't know before these experiments that we could actually influence people that much. So that's where I love this one.
What I particularly love is the fact that you've not said the psychology of magic, but you've said the magic of psychology.
Yeah,
like that small little distinction. Oh, it just makes us like a massive smile on my face. And I think all of us, myself and Ashley included, we've looked at Darren and we thought, oh, Darren Brown, amazing. And the three of diamonds in particular, like, we've seen all of these and thought, we have to try this. We just have to go and try it. But the fact that you've just gone and actually tried it with research, Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Was there anything that surprised you as you started actually learning about like the psychology within magic? Was there anything that stood out as like I don't know, a surprise?
I think two main things. The first one is that we are fooled way more easily than I thought we could be fooled. And the second one is that magicians tend to rely a lot on intuitions rather than actual facts. So like I'm surprised all the time for each experiment, and I'm working with my supervisor who is like a magician and who has been a professional magician as well. And so we start each experiment with a hypothesis based on the magic literature, such as, so we have an experiment, we have done several experiments on the crisscross force. And so when you read the magic literature on that, you basically read all the time that the crisscross force or the crosscut force works basically because you have a time of misdirection when you do the cross shape. And we were sure that it was about this, and it's not at all. So basically we found out that when you have no misdirection at all, you do the cross shape and you ask the spectators straight away to take the force card, they don't get it. Like it's not useful to have a time of misdirection. So we were really surprised by this. We thought it was a mistake. We've done several new experiments. We had the same results. And then we wanted to try to really break the force to see why it was working so well. So we ended up having numbers from 1 to 52 on the back of the cards, like big numbers on the back of the cards, and asking people to do the cross shape and take the cards straight away as well without misdirection. It was still working, like I think 90% of the time. People were just not paying attention at all, and it was still working. So then we ended up basically removing the cross shape, having the numbers on the back of the cards, just asking people to cut the deck, take the force cards, and it was still working more than half of the time. So basically we are like, and it's the same for like we tested the Magician's Choice with like 4 different cards, and we wanted to see whether we could make people understand that they were forced by repeating the same sequence 3 times in a row. So I had like 4 cards on the table, always forcing the 3rd card from the left, for instance, 3 times in a row. So they were seeing that they were always ending up with the same card, whether they would touch different cards each time, and it was still working. So basically, the 2 main things, I'm going back to the beginning, sorry, is that people are fooled way more easily than I thought, and maybe magicians overestimate how much they have to make efforts to fool some people, which is a good thing, I guess.
So we're saying that it's far much easier to do our job than what we assume. Like we're putting a lot into it. And secondly, you said something there. I know so many magicians talk about time misdirection, but you're saying that doesn't really play much of a factor when it comes to certain things, like with the criss-cut force. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. That's amazing, but just it's working as much without the time misdirection. In the basic experiments, I asked people to cut the deck. I did the cross shape. Then I asked them, "What's your name again?" to take their attention away from the deck. Just have a time delay as well. So it was just like 15, 20 seconds. It worked 100% of the time. We had no participants understanding that they were forced. And then for the other group, I took away the attentional misdirection. So I was just having a time delay where I was awkwardly staring at the deck for 15 seconds, just to have the time delay to see whether it was having an impact or not. And then in the other condition, I had no time delay and no "what's your name again?" question. So we just wanted to have different groups to see whether attentional misdirection, asking someone a question, and time delay had an impact, but it's not useful. Well, you don't necessarily need these, at least.
That's
it was
so
very controversial. I know that it's really hard to considerate, but I really encourage you to try it yourself.
I love that. I know so many people listening right now will be mind blown because it's like you say, it's in every book, because that's what people assume. And what you're saying, it goes down to people just being fooled so much more easier than we first assume. And why do you think then, like, this is a question that comes into my mind, why do you think people are so easily fooled by something so simple then?
I think it depends on the force of the on the technique. For this particular trick, we ended up thinking that what happens basically is that the cross shape, what happens in the crosscut force is quite unusual visually for people. And so they tend to simplify it unconsciously in their heads, and they end up thinking that they are taking the cards they cut to. And that goes back to the facts, basically, where we tend to simplify things without being aware of this, and to take shortcuts whenever we can. So if you look at what's called the psychological forces in the magic literature, basically what happens most of the time is that these kind of forces works because we tend to go for automatic, impulsive type of behaviors, and we tend to take a path of least resistance, basically. So if we can make our life easier, we will try to unconsciously do so. So for instance, if I do a visual riffle force, the spectator is going to take the card I want them to take because I'm making it easier to see than the others. I'm making it easier to memorize than the others. If I'm using some strategic positioning for the cards, people will tend to grab the card which is closer to their hands. And if you use some priming mechanisms, such as Darren Brown's techniques, even if it's not working 100% of the time, people are thinking the card which is made easier to think for them.
This is amazing. And it's simplicity being such an underpinning factor. Just we operate so simply. So just being able to leverage that's amazing. And there's so many times in all of the magic books and everywhere, we get these routines that are really complicated, really convoluted in order to hide a force or to make a force hidden. And actually what we might benefit from is just making it even more simple. That's just fascinating. I love that. And I'm literally gigging in a couple of, next week, I think. And I'm going to be 100% trying this crosscut force without the misdirection, just to see and actually see it live, which is, I'm so excited. This is so cool.
Let me know what happens. I'm really curious.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be doing it all day, 100%. That's it. The only trick I'll be doing now is just that. Oh dear. Well, here's the thing then, because we've spoken a little bit about sort of how they work, why they work, and which is amazing. But I mean, it's painfully obvious at this point. But why should somebody actually? Say somebody listening to this that maybe doesn't do psychological forces, or maybe doesn't really do any forces in their act whatsoever. Why should they care about understanding this stuff?
I think, I'm not sure it's the best analogy, but I think magic is a bit like driving a car. Like you can drive your car, like you can learn how to drive a car and go wherever you want by learning the tricks of the car, turning the wheel and stepping on the brake and so on. But the day you want to improve your car and make it faster, or the day you have some issue with your car and you want to fix it, you will have either to know someone who can help you with this and someone who understands the car, or you will have to yourself understand the mechanisms making the car works, right? So I think magic is a bit like this. You can be a good performer. You can have like a lot of tricks, but still, if you want to improve your tricks, you still have to understand why it's working and play with this. So I think that's where it gets interesting.
I like that. And I like the analogy. I think it works really, really well. It goes down to that. There's a sigh of relief there. It goes down to that old saying, like, it's in order to I'll be honest, there's a saying, and it's about sharpening a saw, and I think it was Abraham Lincoln, but I can't remember the full quote right now. But long story short is that given enough time, the easiest way for him to chop down the tree is not to keep hacking at it with a blunt saw. It's just to spend more time sharpening the saw so that it takes less swings of the axe to cut down the tree. And it's the same kind of concept here. If we want our performances to get better, it's one step to just do more performances and get more flight time out of it and improve from there. But it's another thing entirely to look behind the scenes and see what's going on and be able to use that to make the figurative axe sharper. That your analogy is way better than mine. We'll go with that. Well, but this is really interesting because we've again, cards are so fundamental in Magic. Have you done any work outside of playing cards?
Yes, so we've done some work unpublished on forces using restrictions. So, for instance, the kind of thing that you can find in Banachek's books. So, asking people to think of two simple geometric shapes, one inside the other one, and then people end up thinking of a circle inside a triangle. So, we did some experiments on this, and we don't have results, so that's why it's unpublished. So basically what I'm finding is that it's not reliable, and whether you actually use restriction or not. So for instance, if I ask someone to choose a number between 1 and 10, for example 3, that's what the type of script that you can find in Banachek's book, using restriction, like implicit restriction, just by naming 3. It's supposed to enhance the likelihood that people will choose the number 7. So when we do experiments where we have one condition in which we say choose a number between 1 and 10, for example 3, or another condition where we say choose a number between 1 and 10, basically what we find is that it has the same, like you have the same results, whether you have some kind of restriction or not. You have the same percentage of people choosing 7. So you don't necessarily need that as well. And it's still not reliable, not really reliable, because it's maybe like 40% of people choosing this kind of items. But still, I have to say, we have limitations in the scientific methods. So for this type of experiments, it's often online. It's not in the context of a magic trick, so we are probably missing some important stuff as well.
That's so interesting. And I know people like, as soon as you mentioned like the circle, triangle, square, whatever force it's called, I saw Ashley's face, because Ashley loves that and uses it quite well.
Every time I gig, every table. Yeah, which is why it surprised me. And now I've started thinking about it. I wonder what it is about my performances that makes it work, because I know sometimes people will look about this stuff and go, okay, if a force works, it might just work, and they remember the times they get lucky and forget about the times it doesn't, which might persuade them to use it. But genuinely for me, it works, I would say, like a lot. Like I haven't monitored it like you, because I'm not going out there, science background, like I need to prove every table and work out what the statistics are between each table. Like that's not what I'm there for. But like, if I had to take a stab in the dark, I would say at least 8 out of 10. Again, this is only a stab in the dark to get an estimate. And I'm wondering what it is about my style of performance, and whether it is as simply as being in the style of a magic trick, or is there something else that we're doing, or is there something that we're doing as performers to heighten the likelihood that we're just not aware of? Because if we're doing it the same way, which we are, why is one more reliable than the other? Like, this is a really fascinating question, and I doubt we're going to get an answer in the podcast, but it's literally just come to me. And I'm like, because this is so fascinating for people that listen, because we get a lot of mentalists, a lot of magicians do these things, like the cross-cut force we mentioned at the beginning. You're saying about timing misdirection, you've just said, yeah, that's irrelevant, you don't need that. Like, blown people's minds immediately. And now you're saying, like, psychological forces, so far, like, you need to do more work on them, but they're not that accurate. So I'm wondering, like, is there a missing piece of the puzzle, or have the magicians that have just done it doing something else that they're not aware of, or is it just the fact that they've just been lucky?
I think it's different things. So I'm not saying it's not working at all. So what I was saying for the choose a number between 1 and 10, for instance, is just that the restriction is not playing a huge part, if playing a part at all. But for the circle triangle thing, for instance, I think the research shows that it's about 45 to 50%, which is already great. But it's not in the context of a magic performance. And I think as a performer, you will, for instance, not immediately start with this kind of trick, and you will have like build some kind of rapport, like relationship with your spectators. You will engage them in the whole process. You will be live rather than online, having people reading the script. So all these factors will definitely have an impact on how much people will end up choosing the items you want. And that's things that, unfortunately, we have to remove from the scientific method, because if we want to look at one specific factor to see whether it has an influence or not on what's happening, we have to like try to control everything else. So that's where it's hard as well to see the impact of other social factors. And I think you definitely have like so many things that you do as performers which enhance the success rate of this kind of stuff, definitely.
I think Ashley's just in that moment there, we just brought Ashley into the world of psychology, and so many questions and just so few answers, and it will go on and on and on forever. And it's really interesting. Like you mentioned that the scientific method, like you've got to strip an awful lot of traditional magic out in order to find out what magic is. It must be so difficult to navigate. And I mentioned to you a while back, a few weeks back, one of the things that a little personal ambition is to go and perform my witch hand routine, which just relies on psychological methods, and just do that like with somebody like under a brain scan, or just some way of being able to see literally what goes on. But it doesn't look like that's going to be even remotely scientifically valid anymore, which is just so confusing. It's wow. I mean, oh, wow. I've just had a little bit of a thing there. So I want to steal a question from a very great podcast I listened to, the Flow Research Collective. They talk to peak performers and industry professionals all over the world, and they round out their interviews with a question that I want to drop in right now. And it's quite simply the research genie. And it's this idea that if you could have like one research question just answered, like you wake up in the morning and on your desk is just a research question that's just been fully answered right there for you, what would that question be? And I know that's very on the spot, but I'm just...
Do I have to say with magic though?
Anything you like.
I think I would want to see why placebo works, placebo effects, because we still have so many things to understand about this. But it makes me think it's still related to magic somehow. We started doing some experiments using fake placebo machines. So basically I had like a fake EEG machine. I would put like fake EEG stuff on people's heads and basically make them think and believe that the machine was reading their minds or influencing their minds. And I was using some mentalism techniques to do this, to prove that I was actually I was ask people to choose some number in the head and then tell me the number, and I was showing them that I had the number already. And we are finding that these kind of techniques taken from mentalism are really useful as well to study placebo effects, because we had like so many participants starting to have like weird physical sensations when they thought the machine was influencing their minds. And it was so interesting. We are trying to find ways now to use these mentalism techniques to have placebo effects on either depression or even creativity. So that's where we are going next, using magic to help people.
Wow. I mean, that's so interesting, and I feel like I need to keep updated with all of this, because this is fascinating. I've never been speechless on the podcast before.
Can I just, and it's okay if you don't know the answer to this, because this has come from just like a big question, like where would you start when looking into using a placebo for something like that?
What do you mean?
Like, you'll mention like using it to help people with like creativity or depression. Like, where would you start? Like, how would you go about like actually making that a thing and like helping people? Like, my mind is blown that this is like something which you'd want to work on, like if the opportunity came up. But like, how would you go about, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like, how would you go about like making that a thing and actually using it?
So basically, we actually want to do this. So we want to use this kind of fake machine and say, okay, this machine will help you. Well, enhance your creativity. Like, it will have an impact on your brainwaves, and it will enhance your creativity. But before we measure participants' creativity, we will use mentalism techniques to prove that you are actually influencing their brainwaves or actually influencing their thought process. So we take mentalism techniques. We show that, well, we can read their mind with the machine. We can actually implement some thoughts in their mind, which is an illusion. People don't know that. And then we say, okay, now we're going to program the machine so that it enhance your creativity, or it can impact some brain areas and make you happier and this kind of stuff.
So it's the ultimate deception, but for the ultimate good.
Yeah. And the next step would be to say, this is an illusion. Still do the same thing and see whether it works or not. Because research is now showing that you can do what's called open label placebo and say to people, this pill is a sugar pill, but maybe it can have an impact on your health. So let's see what happens. And still you can have placebo effects, and people will have benefits from that.
I actually heard a lot about that because I used to be really interested in placebos when I was studying biology. Like, I've recently got a new book, which is like the science and technology of growing older. And like, I remember me and you, Aidan, talking about a lot of things mentioned in there. Like, it's mainly like, if you want to live longer, you have to believe and think that you can live longer, and then you do. And like, there's studies out there to suggest that, like, if you're out there thinking, oh, I'm going to die at a certain age, then you will. It's like, and I think there was, we were talking to someone about this the other day, a young lad called Shanad, about, what was it? Was it Roger Bannister, Aidan?
Yeah, the Bannister effect.
That was it. Yeah, and it was that whole idea of, I can't remember what it is, but someone running a 100-meter race, and then everyone, once they believe they could run it. Do you want to can you just quickly fill that in? Because I feel like that's very relevant, yet I can't remember exactly what the Bannister effect is overall, so I'm relying on you filling out my question for Alice here, Aidan.
Bannister effect being the belief that nobody could run a mile in 4 minutes, and as soon as Roger Bannister he did the 4-minute mile, suddenly within a month, 2 months, 3 months, a very short period of time afterwards, suddenly everyone all over the world was able to run that 4-minute mile, and it was just that glass ceiling, that mindset that was broken, and as a result, new possibility was opened up.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's the same for intelligence as well. Like, I don't know if you've heard about the growth mindsets. So basically, if you think that intelligence is something which is fixed, and you are intelligent or not, or if you think that you can, like, it's malleable and you can improve and become more intelligent, these kind of beliefs will definitely have an impact on how intelligent you can be. So it's just a question of mindset and what you think you can do or be, which is very interesting.
Well, I remember when I spoke to Scott Barry Kaufman about this for a little while last year. Wow, time flies. A little while ago, and we spoke about this whole concept of intelligence in the context of actually getting people to take action, and for further context, it was about actually our Learn to Thrive coaching program, and we found that from all of the people that apply and actually come through to actually join the course, the one thing that we seem to find is across the board for the people that do really, really well in that course and through the application process and everything, is that concept of open mindset, growth mindset. And it was just fascinating. And as soon as we had the penny drop moment of, oh wow, that's a significant factor, suddenly we switched up everything, and that's really now the only thing that we're filtering for. as we get people in. So again, completely out of context, but same sort of context point there. But simplicity, we kept it simple.
So I wanted to ask a question at this moment, because I'm going to be honest, Alice, this wasn't the direction I thought this podcast would take. And like, personally, like, I've learned a lot. Like, you've changed my opinions on so many things here, and I thank you, because like, this has been golden, like what you shared. And for you, I imagine you're just like, oh, I came on, I talk about some really, really simple stuff, and these boys just looked mind blown. But we are. But I wanted to ask, like, at this point, why did you get into this? Why this fascination with how people think?
That's a good question. I think I'm very interested in decision making, because we make so many decisions all day long that it tells a lot about who we are as people. And the fascination with like forcing techniques is related to this as well, because I think it also tells a lot about how we think. We are free from a lot of influences all the time. And in fact, so many of our decisions are influenced by either external factors or internal factors as well, such as if I am hungry, I will make very different decisions as if I am not. So don't go to the grocery store if you're very hungry. You will not make great decisions. And I think just looking at these very specific concepts and things tells a lot about people in general. Like if you look at people's like memory processes, it's very specific. If you look at decision making, I think it's more related to, so like it's related to so many other psychological principles that it's a great way to understand people in general. And why do I want to understand people? I don't know. I think it's fun.
It is. It most certainly is. That is the right answer there. Not that there is a right answer, but in this case there was, and that was it. Yeah, I think from my perspective, just to throw that in there, is like I'm obsessed with this kind of stuff because it helps me do my jobs better just by being able to like at least understand. It gets really hard to be angry at people when you've got a little bit of an idea and on why they've thought that or done that thing or made that decision. And it's so interesting because it just means that, especially in performance mode in Magic, like we can accurately reflect what people are doing, saying, thinking, feeling, and use that to actually blend into Magic, which is something that's particularly fascinating, truth be told.
Yeah. That's the great thing as well. Like if you understand these processes, you can actually take advantage of your brain flows and make it better for you in your day-to-day life, as well as like if you're a magician and you understand the psychological principles underpinning the techniques, then you can improve it.
And we've spoken about this the whole time in terms of the psychological underpinning of Magic, but I want to look at the other side of the coin right now, because we've got the underpinning of Magic here, the using psychology to make the magic better or even work in the first place. But there's a lot of performers out there that don't do it that way round. They do the magic pretending it's psychology, and they do the card tricks pretending that it was some mind control situation here, and I think a lot of it's come from like Darren's rise to fame and all of the work that he's done. And I'd just love to get your thoughts on that whole concept of, because I guess the core question is using magic as a disguise for psychology. Is that kind of ethical? What are your thoughts on that?
It's very hard for me to answer this question because, like, from my personal point of view, I really like this type of performance. I think it's my favorite ones. Like, I'm a huge Darren Brown fan, and I love this type of presentation. From a scientific point of view, I have to say it's not a great thing to do, because we have also done so many research showing that even though you have a disclaimer saying that you don't actually, like, it's an illusion, it's a show, you don't use like psychic powers, or that you will lie to your spectators at some point in the show. If at some point later or during the show you present your effect as based on psychology or cold reading or, reading people's body language or this kind of stuff, people, like, it will be very hard for people to leave the show without believing this, even if you have some type of disclaimer. So I'm not sure it's helpful for science or for spectators as well, because it's like, if people believe in this kind of stuff, they will, for instance, I think there's many young students arriving in psychology, like as undergrads, believing in this type of stuff, and then becoming very, how do you say that? Not bored, but disappointed. And yeah, so if you're very skeptical in nature and you see a show talking about this stuff and framing it as psychological, maybe it will be okay. But if you're not very sure about your beliefs about this, it will definitely have an impact on your spectators' beliefs, and not sure it's very helpful.
And just to expand on that question, because there's also a different type of performer, as we know. There's a performer that will present mentalism tricks, like mind reading tricks, as psychic. So they go out there, they perform as a psychic. They do tarot readings. They go out there and do mind reading and say that it's real and say that it's psychic, myself included.
He's describing his act here, by the way, just to paint the picture.
And I'm really curious to know at this point. Forget I'm here. Be like completely honest with your answer here. Like, literally, if you want to insult me. That's what I'm saying. You can say whatever you want. But we've spoken about your opinion on people presenting magic tricks as if they have as if it's all psychology and all about that. What's your opinion on people presenting magic tricks as if they have like a divine psychic power?
I think it can be very dangerous, because then, like, it's fine when you're a magician and you do a magic show. It's like, it's all right. But then people live with some beliefs, and they will look for other answers from people who will not maybe have your intention as a magician, which are good, and then ending up losing a lot of money, time, and energy as like searching for answers in places which are not appropriate. So I think it can be very dangerous for, well, again, people who have already these types of beliefs or are not very sure about this stuff. Like, if you're very skeptical, I'm not sure it's going to have a huge impact, but yeah.
Yeah, it's those people who is like the skeptical people from both answers are the category which is safe, but it's the other people then. Is there a way of maybe, let's say, presenting psychic or psychological mentalism so that it doesn't have a negative impact on the people that we're performing it?
Not sure. I can't see one, actually. And I'm very sorry to say that, because I love this type of performances, but I don't, for now, I can't see a way in which is not hurtful.
Yeah. So I guess maybe the answer there is we just need to be more honest and just say that we're magicians.
Yeah. Like, there's also, we've done some research on like the type of words and frames you use to present your performance. And you can read, for instance, a lot of the time that's using words such as trick is not a good way to present your performance. And you have to frame it in another way, say effects, for instance, or other kind of words. But when you look at like very famous magicians, like Juan Tamariz or, I don't know, David Blaine, they use this kind of words. And when you look at whether it has an impact on how much people enjoy the performance, it doesn't matter to them. Like, they like it just as much if you say it's a trick, it's just an illusion, or it's some kind of mentalism, clever technique, which is good, right?
It's reassuring. It's reassuring, to say the least. No, that's so interesting, because the belief systems of our audiences are so important to be able to pick up on. And I think we're just talking surface level here and just presenting tricks overall in either one or two of these categories. But you are digging even deeper and say traditional plotting mentalism is think of a thing or think of a personal memory, think of something personal, write it down, and I'll divine it through either some form of psychological or psychic approach, in which case, like, the more personal pieces of information seem to be the better at generating reactions for the most part. There seems to be a strong correlation. I don't know whether there's any specific research on that, but it just, from personal experience, seems to be the case. But actually that could end up becoming part of the problem, which is such a weird situation to be in. And I'd love to know, like, how can we go about, say, we're performing later this week. What can we do to explore this stuff in a little bit more depth and just be a bit more aware of it in performance mode?
What do you mean part of the problem? Why do you think it can be a problem that people enjoy it more when it's more personal?
Well, I just think it seems to be a case that because it's more personal, people latch onto it more and people stick with it more. And as a result of people, like, if I revealed what number you put face up on a dice, yes, that's cool. I did a cool trick with a dice. But if I told you the name of your first or your favourite pet as a child, and you've got really good memories with that pet as a child, like, you're going to remember that. You're going to stick with that. And I think the process of how that was divined, I think that just seems to stick a little bit more. People will resonate with it. For example, if Ashley goes on, and it's one of the reasons, like, our show is so polarizing. Like, we're writing a show at the minute, and it's literally the psychic and the psychologist on stage for an evening. So it's it's both ends of the ethical spectrum right there. But for Ashley, in his case, like, if he's divining that really personal piece of information, well, their belief in this psychic approach is probably going to stick, or at least be changed in some way, whether that's positive or negative, relative to whether it's just a dice.
Yeah, but I guess you can have the same effect with a different frame. Like, I think you can perform this without saying that you're using psychic powers, right? And people will enjoy it just as much. And people who already believe you're psychic or who already believe in psychic stuff will live the show with the same beliefs. But if you have spectators who are unsure, again, it will have an impact. So, yeah, I think it's really hard to answer. It's just the thing is, as well, I think as a performer you attract different types of spectators. So I guess maybe if you have like a show framed on psychic powers, you will probably have more spectators who already believe in this kind of stuff. So maybe it's less of an issue then. I would be very keen on actually doing some research on that and seeing whether you have very different types of audiences. I don't have any solution for this right now, but yeah, I would just try to advise performers to be careful with what they're claiming. If you can, like, if you're already in you already have built your character based on this kind of stuff, you obviously can't change everything, but at least be careful when you can. Like, if it's not necessary for you to claim some stuff, don't do it, and just observe that people will like it just as much.
Has been so eye-opening for so many people. Again, not the route we thought we'd take it, but I think me and Aidan asked those questions more so out of pure, literal, selfish interest on what on earth we're doing and how we're presenting mentalism. But I know it applies to so many people listening, and again, it's another one of those moments again, Alice, where people have just been like, oh, and just reconsidered absolutely everything. So again, thank you so much. Like, your advice, like we've covered today, obviously, like forcing and time misdirection and obviously restrictions, and now when it actually comes down to like the ethics behind presenting mentalism, like there's so much in this episode alone for so many people to dig into, look at. We've had Ariel throughout this live podcast literally just putting his thumbs up, just like, yep, 100%, that is amazing, perfect, thank you. And I really want to say a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart, and as well from Aidan's. He's been talking about this particular live podcast for ages because he genuinely loves the psychology behind magic, and it's what he rants about all the time in his spare time.
Well, thanks. I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy that you like the research as well. And
it's brilliant. Genuinely brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to finish off then, Alice, like we've got an audience in 100. Look, we've had Ariel there. Fantastic session. Thanks so much to discuss. There you go, Alice. A comment straight in from Ariel there. And to really wrap up, you know, like I said at the beginning, before we started recording today, we've got an audience in 101 countries now, Aidan. What would you like to finish on? Is there a message that you'd like to share? Is there a piece of advice that you'd like to share? I'll leave it to you.
I think the main message would be to always be willing to reconsider your beliefs and what you know, because it's so worth it. Like when you just try to see things from another point of view, which is not yours, you have so many things to learn.
So good. So good. All aspects of life. That literally covers everything. Inside and outside magic. Everything for everyone.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Alice, where can the people of the world follow you, support your work? Because I have a feeling a few people might want to do that after this discussion.
So you can find my work on my website, which is www.alicepailhès.com. And you can follow me on Instagram. I'm putting updates on our work or on our papers, on the Science of Magic Association as well, for which we have webinars right now, free webinars with great performance. So if you want to join, you're more than welcome.
Fantastic. We'll make sure all of that is linked in the in the notes, as every podcaster says ever. Well, Alice, thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. It's been so eye-opening for so many people, and I'm just going to say, we'd love to have you back on again, but please keep us updated with the research, and thank you for this conversation.
Thank you so much.